And here we go. So welcome everybody. Last Thursday, I want to start the class by, it really fits in so beautifully with this idea of positivity bias. Many of you were on a lecture we had on Thursday with Dr. Edith Eva Eger, who's a Holocaust survivor and really just a powerful woman and so inspiring. And she wrote this book called The Choice. But as a survivor, she's also a psychologist. And just her answers, she's so humble. One of the questions that we asked her on Thursday evening was, don't you feel bitter, like with what was done to you? And her simple response, Adina and I were talking about it after, she was like, why should I feel bitter when I could feel better? It's like literally just changing one letter, but it changes everything. And really, I think positivity bias, this idea of having a positive eye and a positive thought, obviously it's a training and you have to be proactive, but it starts with like changing those little letters, changing little words. And what I'd like to do today is really offer practical guidance, maybe hear from some of you. I have a lot to share, and it's based on, I just put the book down, but it's based on this book, Positivity Bias. That's better. I've been reading a lot of it for my second time in preparing for the class. And if anyone else has some of their own tips that they would like to share, of course, that would be lovely. Okay, so let's begin. I've been getting a lot of beautiful feedback from people of implementing certain things, and I'm hoping that this evening we could really bring things all together and make things very practical. And that's an important point of Judaism, to make things practical, not keep things abstract or aloof. So the Rebbe once encouraged, there was a person who was seeking guidance, and he had talents, but he wasn't properly using them to the fullest. And the Rebbe gave him guidance of how to use his talents. And the Rebbe asked him, are you fulfilling what we discussed? And the Rebbe told him, don't turn me into a sinner. And the man said, Rebbe, how could I possibly do that? And the Rebbe responded that in our sages, they tell us that excessive talk brings a person to sin. And if our previous conversation has no practical outcome, if there's no solutions and outcome that comes from it, all it is was excessive talk. It has to lead to what in Hebrew is called tachlis, the bottom line, the outcome. Or in another word that Adina and I use often is, what's the bechein? Where do we go with this? And every teaching of the Rebbe, and I learned quite a lot of them are with incredible depth and talking about very abstract subjects, but every talk ended with, how do we bring this to a practical level? How do we bring this home? The Rebbe did that with everyone he encountered, every interaction. And the Rebbe would say over and over that the Torah is a blueprint. And that's not the Rebbe's own word, that's not the words that the Rebbe made up. That's from the Midrash, where that it says, Istakel be'eraisa ubara alma. God looked in the Torah and created the world. So everything, the Rebbe would always remind us that the word Torah itself comes from the word in Hebrew of hora or hora'ah. Many people that are teachers, and in Hebrew school or in Israel, they are called a mora, which means not only a teacher, but a guide, a mentor. The Torah is supposed to be our guide. But if we want Torah to be our guide, we have to utilize it. And we have to live with a certain standard of looking in the Torah, not just as intelligence, but looking at the Torah as a source of guidance. The Rebbe would quote, I'm sorry, more people are trying to get in. The Rebbe would often quote Maimonides. The Rambam, or Maimonides in English, was often quoted source of the Rebbe. The Rebbe even instructed Jews in the mid-'80s. The Rebbe started a campaign that every single Jew should study Rambam, the Maimonides Book of Laws, which is where the Code of Jewish Law is originally based on, is the Book of Maimonides. But Maimonides later on in life, after his magnum opus, which is the Mishnah Torah, the Maimonides, the Book of Laws, he also, towards the end of his life, wrote a book of Jewish philosophy. It's called The Guide to the Perplexed. In Hebrew, it's called Moreh Nevuchim. It's a lot more philosophical. And the Rambam offers reasoning behind things in Torah. And someone once asked the Rebbe, who was Maimonides? When I read him, I'm trying to get a picture, he asks, for who was Maimonides. When I read him in his text of Mishnah Torah, in the text of laws, I get one style of Maimonides' personality. But when I read the text of Maimonides and the Guide to the Perplexed, I see a different side of Maimonides. So who was he? And the Rebbe says, if you want to know Maimonides, you would be able to tell his personality, the author of the book, you'll be able to know who he is from the Book of Laws that he wrote. Because in the Book of Laws is where you see the person's real part. It's in the practical parts to him that is bringing him to life. Meaning it's the bottom line outcome that he brings that makes it real. And contrast that with Aristotle. Actually, the Rambam would often, Maimonides himself would quote Aristotle, and because he was a wise man. And the Rambam says that I already studied a lot of the Chachmei Ummah Ta'olam, the wisdom of the rest of the world, and I'm bringing the important parts for you to study in books, in my books. That's what the Rambam says. But Aristotle, this is not the story from the Rambam, but they say that Aristotle was once confronted by one of his students. And Aristotle was in the middle of engaging in immoral behavior. And the student asked him, Aristotle, the author of ethics, how could you stoop so low? And Aristotle answered, at this moment, I'm not Aristotle the teacher, I'm Aristotle the person. So in certain ways, in certain places, we don't judge a person by his inability to live up to his own philosophical ideas or ideals. But in Judaism, we rule based on a person's bottom line. A person could be talking, but excessive talk and leading to no action, there's nothing there. There's nothing tangible there. And in this, the Rebbe would highlight the difference between Torah and secular wisdom by saying that in secular knowledge, it's judged based on the intellectual merits of what he's trying to bring or she's trying to bring with a book or with a point, but not as practical, making it applicable and practical. Whereas in Torah, it's all based on what's the bottom line, like how does this lead to action? And that was a fundamental idea by the Rebbe, is bringing things to the bottom line, bringing things to action. And I hope that makes sense. And if there's any questions, Ava, it seems like Ava's studying Maimonides. That's amazing. The Sefer Mitzvot. That's amazing. So we just finished the cycle of studying Maimonides on an annual cycle for learning either 3 chapters a day and finishing it in a year, or learning 1 chapter a day and finishing it in 3 years. And there's also another cycle to study the Sefer Mitzvot, going through the 613 mitzvot throughout the year and understanding the meaning behind them. And there's a lot of incredible texts online. Howard, I was speaking with you about it, I think last week we were talking about it. That's amazing things. Hold on 1 second, everyone. Awesome. So, maybe I'll take a note of that. I'll just add that in a email tomorrow, add some Rambam text. Awesome. Thank you. So actually I'll share a nice picture. I'm Canadian, so I always revert back to stories from my hometown. One of the Canadian prime ministers, there's a couple of good ones. One of the prime ministers, his name is Brian Mulroney. I'll actually pull him up on the screen. But a group of Chabad rabbis, and this is often a picture either Hanukkah or another time of the year with the President of the United States, all the way back from Jimmy Carter. You see a picture of Chabad rabbis and the President, and with the Canadian Prime Minister also, Chabad rabbis from different provinces across Canada would meet with the Canadian Prime Minister, and they planned to gift him with a silver Kiddush cup as a token gift to the Prime Minister of Canada. And then when they wrote this in advance of their meeting, they wrote this to the Rebbe as part of the report. The Rebbe answered, like, what practical, what use could the Prime Minister have with the Kiddush cup? It's a nice token, but is he obligated to make Kiddush on Friday night? Like, what are you giving him a cup for? The Rebbe suggested give him an English prayer book, which has Moda Ani, a prayer thanks to start his morning off with, and have him teach him how to recite a prayer of thanksgiving every morning. That's something that could be practical. And if everyone's okay, I'd just like to share that. So, if I could pull it up. I had it on my screen before. Sorry, guys. Hold on one second. I just wanted to pull it up. Oh, here it is. And actually, just because one of the members of this picture was my teacher for a couple of years, I'll tell you a funny story about him, actually, with a positive ending. This is the Prime Minister together with, I know actually many of these people. These two, let me put my red dot if everyone could see. Could everyone see my red dot? So, okay, great. So this one over here with the longer beard, his name is Rabbi Mutchkin, and he's the head shliach, the head Chabad rabbi in Montreal, and actually in the province of Quebec. And he was my teacher for a couple of years. Over here, they're meeting the Prime Minister, different Chabad rabbis. This is Rabbi Zirkin, also a Chabad rabbi in Montreal, but particularly Rabbi Mutchkin. Anyway, they're meeting here. They gifted him the prayer book. This is at the Parliament. But Rabbi Mutchkin, he's thank God he's healthy and well. He was my teacher for a couple of years, but he's Russian, and his English wasn't perfect, but he was a great teacher. He would teach us Talmud and teach us manners. But one day we were a rambunctious bunch of young, energetic Chabad boys. And he was also, besides for teaching, he was running a lot of different programs in Montreal. And also he was in charge of the overnight camp, which was like 2 hours north of Montreal. It's in the Laurentians, which is like Lake Tahoe of Montreal. It's like in the mountains. And he had to go there for some reason during the year, but he didn't want us to leave our place. So in the middle of class, he tells us, don't go anywhere. I'm coming back in 2 minutes. And we're sitting there for like an hour. And then the principal comes in and says, okay, I'll be your substitute for the rest of the day. And we found out that Rabbi Mutchkin had to go up north. He came back 2 days later to school. But anyway, that was the good old days of learning with Russian-style teachers. But it worked. We stayed in our places. We didn't move. So that worked. Anyway, so that was just another example of them realizing that the Rebbe wanted something practical that the Prime Minister even could use. And the same as also, there was a motivational speaker that once complained to the Rebbe. He had self-doubts, and he says, I'm considered a gifted public speaker. I've given thousands of talks, but how many of my talks actually hit home? What effect am I actually having on people? And he was having doubts on his ability to inspire. And the Rebbe says, from Tractate Sanhedrin, where the Rebbe says, Dvarim hayetzim min halev nichnasim el halev, which means words that come from the heart will enter the heart. If they leave your heart, they will be able to penetrate, and you could be assured that they will enter the other person's hearts. But if, however, you want to be able to observe actual change, and not just inspire your audiences, but actually change them and have them make a practical change, the Rebbe says, I suggest, don't speak in abstract terms. Bring it, even if it's just one thing, even if it's a minimal thing. This is how you inspire change, by taking and having people resolve a specific action that they should do. And literally, you don't find a talk of the Rebbe without the words in Hebrew of Hamaisa Hu Eker, which means essential action. Deed is the most essential part. Action is the most crucial element to anything that we do. And while abstract study could be gifting to the mind, it's action that will change our ways. Otherwise, it's the Devarim B'Telem. So just taking from the book, from Positivity Bias, I would like to go through just a few practical tips. We'll call it, in the book, he calls it the 10 Commandments for designing a life of positivity. And let's highlight points that could inspire and empower us for a life of positivity. And the fact is, if we live with more of a positive bias and more of an optimistic approach, we will be able to convey that and imbue that to another. And if the people on our call will do that tomorrow with a few people, and we'll continue that the day after, we'll actually be able to inspire real change. So it really starts with me, and it starts with you. So I'm going to just base it on my notes and base it on the book. Number one, and I've been talking with a lot of people, and it's one of the blessings of my job, and it's a gift that Hashem gave me. That first of all, I love talking. That's not the gift. That's just the way I am. But the gift is I get to talk to people, and some people like to listen to me, and I like to listen to others. But it's something I feel like a beautiful blessing. And many people have been telling me that, like, I talk to them, and they're either on the TV or they're reading news on the computer, and it's scary reading news. Some, of course, news is important, so we know what's happening in our world, and we can make educated decisions and votes and everything that's important. But I'm not saying don't read the news, although I did tell that to some people to try not reading the news for a day or two and see that the world will still exist and nothing will fall apart. But also choosing the nature of the news that we're reading. Usually what pops out first is negative news, bad news. That's what we read. And actually a Chabad rabbi, before I even went out on Shlichut, before I even started our community, he said, Menachem, it was an unfortunate thing, but he says, if you want people, the emails that people open most are people that announce people's passing. When it says, with sadness, we announce the passing of, people open that. And of course, people want to know who passed away. But it's also, it's even if people didn't know that person, it's just what people, we tend to navigate to those things. So, of course, it's important to know, and it's a mitzvah to sit shiva with people, and we have to know the information and updates. But so I'm not talking about that type of news. I'm talking about just news in the world that is putting us on the edge of our seats with anxiety. And we're fed things that draw our attention, and the news media knows that. To a story that he shares in the book is, there was a New York Times correspondent, and he actually has beautiful interviews about his times with the Rebbe. His name is his name was Ari Goldman, and he was a journalist for the New York Times. And the Rebbe urged him to remember to report good news. And it was a humble request, but Ari Goldman writes that that influenced him to report more regularly what was going right in the world, not just what was going wrong. And it's not just, this wasn't, I think, the Rebbe's guidance just for media outlets. It's also for media consumers, people that are reading the media. We need to be more conscientious and what our media diet is, what we're choosing to read. And of course, we need to read news or watch the news, but we should also choose to watch some good news also. Don't just passively read the bad news that's being broadcast everywhere, because that gets the most reads. Actively look for good news as well. And sometimes it's quiet, meaning it's not really being posted in all the bigger places, but read some quiet news that's going on around you. And another I think a great point and a great tip that he shares in the book is to share good news. And this you see time and time again. The Rebbe would complain. It's not often that the Rebbe would be complaining, but time and time again, the Rebbe, people, you see this on the video all the time. People will come to the Rebbe and ask for a blessing because a person is in great danger, a family member is in bad health, God forbid. And I see this also. A lot of people ask for prayer, but they forget to actually share a good update. When there's good news, they don't share that part. When things are desperate and dire, things are looking so bad. But when things are good, I forgot to share that part also. And the Rebbe would complain to people that would come to the Rebbe, and then a year later they would come back for $1 and meet the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, "No, what happened? And they were like, "Oh, everything worked out. Thank you, Rebbe." And the Rebbe would complain and say, "Why is it that you don't report back the good news?" And to share good news, and we see this ourselves. I think I shared this in the first or second class, that when we are busy for a day and we have 10 interactions in a day, 9 of them being positive, 1 of them being negative, usually we'll dwell on the negative first. Not that we won't get to the positive, but the first thing that will stay on our mind that we're ready to share immediately before we think is the negative experience, the negative interaction. And as I said from class 1, it's called a negativity bias. It's normal. It's where our attention is grabbed for our safety, for security, to make sure we have a defense mechanism up. But so we need to work on our positivity bias that we were sharing during this series, but also to work on ourselves a practical shift to share good news. That our default response to questions when we're asked is not in a knee-jerk reaction, "Oy, gewalt," but rather, "Ah, amazing." And it's important that we start with a positive attitude in any conversation we're having, not to ignore. I'm not saying to ignore the negative parts. It's important to share that, and it's important, especially among friends, to have a safe place where you could open up. But I'm not saying to ignore the challenges, but we'll come back to them. Start with positive. Start with a highlight of your day, something exceptional, something amazing that happened. And I would say use that as a priority to share good news and to share a positive experience that you've had. Seeing the news I'm just reading one of the questions from a point of prayer. Notice the first response was the goodness happening around and the people feeling compassion. First responders. There was a celebrity that was doing a YouTube show based on only good news. John Krasinski, some good news. I think it's amazing, Maddie. I think there's some media outlets that they were called Good News, and they never made it big. Most of us didn't hear of them. But
yes, I've definitely heard of that and felt really gutted.
Okay.
Because I always really wanted to be like the TV presenter on the Good News channel, and they never do well. It's really quite incredible.
Yeah, and I think I shared, Adina and I, actually, it's interesting, over Shabbos, someone in our community subscribed, Adina and I, to a news magazine called The Week. And it's really just, I read the news during the week, but Adina, Baruch Hashem, she's busy with a million things. So Shabbos, she'll take more time to read the news. But sometimes we read it and we just feel a little yucky. It's like, where's the good news? So they have actually a little section out of a 25-page magazine, a quarter of a page, not even a half a page, a quarter of a page is, there is some good news. And they share 2 stories of good news that happened in the week around the world. But actually, just this past Shabbos, we were reading it, and it's never a good feeling reading the news, I have to say. And Hadassah, she was so, I mean, Baruch Hashem, she's 10 and bright. She said, like, "Are you allowed to read the news on Shabbos? Like, should you be reading this?" And it was actually a great question. Legally, there's nothing wrong with reading the news, but is it Shabbos dick? Is it in the spirit of Shabbos? And she had a very good point. If it was good news, perhaps it puts us in a good mood. But if it's not, if it's news that's catching our attention, it was actually a very interesting point for us to ponder. So much of I'm just going to read from Gail, so much of my Jewish news is about mayhem, murder, and anti-Semitic acts. I have to choose the positive items first, and sometimes I just glance at the notes for the bad news. So Gail, start your day first with calling me. We'll kibitz about some good stuff. And then you could keep on reading other things, Gail. But put me on your speed dial. And you're welcome.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you. I think if you actively look for something that is, or not only that, if you notice some headlines that you know are going to take you down that rabbit hole because you're pretty much aware of what that that thread of conversation is, because it's been the same every day for months and months, then, you know, I think obviously it's really important to not bury your head in the sand and forget about what's going on. But I think you can definitely look to really focus on what you want to fill your mind with. And if our part in humanity is to spread joy and love and light, then for me, that's the most important thing that I can do to contribute. And it's not, and I don't actually want to get into conversations with people about really negative news, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, Maddie. And actually, to carry on that point, like, first of all, Maddie, your energy is beautiful. Is so
Thank you.
Contagious of just happiness. And
thank you.
More and more, we have to. Fred, what are you doing there? Oh my goodness, you're scaring me. I'm kidding. Fred, it's fine. It's just definitely adding some action to the class. No, it's great. It looks good. But it's amazing what a smile could do. It's an incredible thing. It's so deceptively simple. But if anyone remembers, if anyone here was on the class on Thursday, I got the best compliment of my life. Barbara, you were there. You saw it. Miss Dr. Eager, she's 92. I started talking there was 4, but we had to help cover some of the costs of having her speak. We divided it amongst a few Chabad rabbis, communities, and now it's much easier with Zoom to share, and it's a beautiful thing of unity and collaboration. So when I started speaking, I'm tooting my horn a little bit here, but it's fine. Rosh Hashanah is coming up, and we're going to be tooting a loud horn anyway, so I'll start it a little early. Where she said, I forgot what she said already, but something like, you have the most gentle face, or the most smiling face, something like that. My mother actually, she joined later, but she missed that part of the call, so I made sure to record it. So I have to say,
the kindest face.
Thank you, the kindest face. Thank you, Isabel.
And I totally agreed with her. I just thought she could get away with it because she's an older lady. But I completely feel the same. There's a really beautiful, generous, warm energy from you.
You're going to make me blush. But
it's true.
So that was the point I was trying to get to, is a simple smile could change an entire attitude of an hour conversation. I'm not saying that happened in that talk, but just when you just smile at someone and then you start a conversation, it changes everything. Or if you just start with saying a positive thing, it changes so much. And I had to be at times in uncomfortable situations, and everyone here has. There's people that have a bad association with the word Chabad, and they're meeting a Chabad rabbi, they're automatically angry. I've never met them before, but so much could happen with just a smile. It changes an entire attitude. And I'm not giving you one example or another. It's really deceptive how simple. And really, when the Rebbe media outlets in the 70s began following the Rebbe more and broadcasting the Rebbe's talks on television, on national television, and many media outlets would be photographing the Rebbe. And when the Rebbe requested that when you're photographing me for media purposes, I request that you choose a picture, select a picture that has me with a smile. Because, of course, there's times when the Rebbe was in a very serious mode. The Rebbe would give deep, intense, Kabbalistic talks with the Rebbe's eyes closed, and it was very meditative. The Rebbe would be singing the Shema with a very fervent mindfulness. But the Rebbe wanted a picture of him where he's going to be seen to be with a smile, because it could expand so much more in people. And there was even an artist. His name was Nachshon. He was a Hasidic artist. And the Rebbe actually, to support him, they brought his art to 770, and the Rebbe looked at him and gave him advice. But one of the advice the Rebbe asked is, there was a portrait of the Rebbe with a serious expression, and the Rebbe asked that it be changed to have a smile. And said, I'm sure it won't be that expensive to change it, that there should be a smile. So really just crafting consciously crafting a demeanor of positivity could, first of all, impact our joy and our positive levels. But as a side effect, as a kick, it also be more desirable. You will be more of a magnet for people to want to be around. Just people want to be around positivity and positive people. And we all know people that are a kvetch, you need to put yourself in a mode to be around them for extended period of times. But someone who's positive and joyful, it's just Magnetica, yes. Oh, I can't wait to be around them, right? So it's so important to be mindful of having a positive attitude and a smile to start our day. I'll continue.
Rabbi, this is one of
Rabbi
Aiden
Steinsaltz.
Steinsaltz,
Yeah.
and in all of his photos that I have, even the ones where he's looking a little serious,
Yeah.
he's smiling. He
Wow,
has that twinkle in his eye
that's
of
beautiful.
where he is smiling. See, I mean, it's just a pleasant look.
Beautiful, Gail. So for those that are not familiar, Rabbi Steinsaltz, he was a giant of Torah. They say like a mind like his comes around once a 1,000 years. He wrote a commentary on the Talmud, and he wrote over 60 books on Kabbalah, the 13 Petaled Rose. He was a Chabad Chassid. Actually, some of my dear friends were nephews and great nephews of his. So anyway, he was I've been watching some of his talks, specifically at Farbrengens and in 770, and it's been very powerful and uplifting. I actually gave a talk about him on Friday before Shabbos. I have a pre-Shabbat sermon, and Gail, you were there as I
Thank you.
shared a
Thank
story
you.
about Rabbi Steinsaltz. Thank you for sharing that. All right, we'll carry on a little more. Is the Rebbe, and again, it's based on the book about dropping a negative talk about oneself or about another. There was someone that came to the Rebbe, and he was bemoaning his spiritual state. And he said, something must be wrong with me. I must be insensitive to spirituality, because I've spent a lot of time in the company of leading saintly rabbis and individuals, but it didn't have any effect on me. I must have a block on a spiritual level that I just can't enter. And the Rebbe interrupted him and says, just as it is forbidden to speak negatively about someone else, even if it's true, it's also forbidden to speak negatively about oneself. And that's, in halacha, it talks about lashon hara, which is saying something negative about someone else, even if it's true, is forbidden. And the Rebbe says the same is true. You're not allowed to speak negatively about ourselves. And it's important to free ourselves from self-deprecating words and thoughts, because when we think and we speak those, it just reinforces negativity or negative beliefs of what we're capable of and what we're not capable of, and it holds us back. In Tanya, which is the foundational book of Chabad, and actually Rabbi Steinsaltz wrote an incredible commentary on the Tanya in a 3-volume set. And for those who would like, I'm happy to share that with you. In Tanya, it considers our emotions, our feelings of our heart, to be like children. Children are affected by their surroundings and are born by their parents. Parents are in Kabbalistic terms, is our mind. Our mind gives birth to our emotions. What we think about will be what we start feeling. But it starts with the thinking. That's one of the foundational ideas of Tanya, in the philosophy of Chabad. And just like we don't insult our children, a good parent, they don't insult their children. They guide them, but you don't insult your children because they're sensitive and you have to be careful. It could be hurtful. Same too, also, you can't insult your feelings. You have to be sensitive to yourself. And you have to be careful with what you share and be careful. And just to share an anecdote about it, there was a woman who complained to the Rebbe that she's been having unwanted thoughts and she doesn't know how to get rid of them. And she was asking the Rebbe for advice. So the Rebbe told her, just to read the words, the mind can't think 2 different thoughts at once. Your mind is thinking one thing or another thing. Your hands could do 2 things, one in one hand, one in the other thing. But your thoughts, you're thinking one thing at a time. So the next time you want to get rid of a thought, don't try to fight them. Simply replace it with a different one. So by becoming more aware of our pattern of a negative talk that is our habit about ourselves, and just to share a story from Rabbi Manis Friedman. Rabbi Manis Friedman, again, he's a big speaker in Chabad. He does the Chabad circuit. He came here actually around 5 years ago, and he gave a beautiful talk of how to like the people you love. And he's a big speaker in Chabad. He actually would be the oral, how do you say this? He would simultaneously, as the Rebbe would speak a 6-hour talk in Yiddish, he would be the one translating that right away into Yiddish. From Yiddish, he would be translating it into English on national television. Anyway, he once shares in his first book that actually, I think it has a foreword from Bob Dylan. I think it's called Why Don't People Blush Anymore? I think he wrote it in the 80s. And he writes in there how showing a healthy relationship with others, with your spouse, is when you go, let's say you go to Trader Joe's. I don't know, Trader Joe's wasn't, I don't know if Trader Joe's was around in the 80s. I think it was, right? I think it says established 1960 something, right? Anyway, if you go to a store and when the husband is fiddling for his wallet to come up with the right change, and the wife is feeling embarrassed because there's a big line and the cashier is, trying to rush through, a lot of times you'll see the spouse, you'll see either the wife or the husband saying to the, feeling embarrassed and telling the cash register, oh, he does this all the time. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, almost like feeling embarrassed because she's with him or he's with her or whatever. And it's humorous, but the point he was trying to say is, who do you owe more to? The person who you're living the rest of your life with, or this person that is a total stranger? Who do you need to show more respect to? Of course, you need to show respect to everyone, but like, where's your allegiance? Like, who are you trying to stand up for? And I'm not. That's another talk we should have about relationships, etc. And I have a lot to learn from people that have, thank God, been in relationships for many, many years on this call. But I'm talking about ourselves. A lot of times, you do something and you can't find your keys, and you're like, "Oh, I'm such a klutz," and it's almost a habit to put yourself down. And really, it's a good to be proactive about training ourselves to not disparage ourselves, not to right away run to the negative. And like the Rebbe says, it's forbidden to speak negatively about you. And when these thoughts are coming, like what the Rebbe told this woman, is replace it with another thought. Think of something positive about yourself. And actively replacing negative self-talk with kind words of affirmation and kind of your own positive narrative about things that are good for your self-image. Not to put yourself in a place of ego, but not to allow yourself to be self-deprecating, not to allow yourself to put yourself down. Another one, I find this to be incredible and so simple, and you all know this, and I'm just repeating it just because it's good to repeat and remind, is to always praise. How often are we easy to rebuke someone? It's actually a mitzvah to rebuke. Now I've been learning a half an hour a day with my 9-year-old Yossi. We learn actually the mitzvahs of the Torah. One of the mitzvahs is to rebuke, and it's important if someone's doing something wrong, it's your job to rebuke them if you know that. And if whatever, there's a lot of details to it, but suffice it to that it's a mitzvah to rebuke. But how often and how much quicker are we to find the faults and the rebuke in someone than to right away find the praise? And I don't know if I shared the story here or somewhere else, where there was I think I shared it here, where a mother would put her child to bed every night after speaking to the teacher, reminding the kid of all the mistakes he made and saying, I'm watching out. And one night there was nothing bad to share, so she just said good night. And the boy was crying because there was such good that he did today, but there was no praises that he got. While it seems so easy to rebuke, and it also is easy to compliment, we focus more on it's so easy to praise. And we need to make sure to get those praises in. That when someone does something good, not only our children, ourselves, pat yourself on the back and be easy to praise. A lot of people are actually, I found this, and I've read in the book, and I think it makes, obviously I agree with the book, I think it makes a lot of sense also that we avoid we avoid qualifying our compliments because they need to be earned. So, I'll be more careful on my compliments because I don't want to give too many. They need to be earned. And you don't want them to be taken for granted. You want them to be valuable for another person. I find that to be wrong. People need to have compliments freely. Go and be generous with your compliments. And the truth is, kindness begets kindness. And a generosity and a spirit and a kind spirit is contagious. And the more we have those compliments flowing, the more it attracts that in others and keeps that generosity going. Just to conclude this thought with, before going on to a little more, there was a Chabad rabbi who he had a correspondence with the Rebbe, like many, and the Rebbe asked him, "Why don't you tell me about what's going on in your family life? How is your wife? How is she coping? How is she handling being in a remote town?" For those that were on the call, just parenthetically, I was last night. We had a call. We had a Zoom with the Chabad rabbi in South Korea. For those that were on the call, I was amazed at this. First of all, his humility, and driving 5 hours to make sure there's someone in the south part of South Korea, they have kosher. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. He's like, Menachem, you would do the same. You know, it's amazing what they're doing, but it could be a lot on a family. So the Rebbe was asking once about, how's your wife doing? So as he was writing about his relationship with his wife and how his wife is coping, he was going on and on about the dynamics of their marriage, and he was being very free on elaborating his wife's many virtues. How she's an Eishes Chayil, she's incredible, she's excellent. But he ended with the words, after getting carried away with so many virtues that were so incredible of his wife, of his Rebbetzin, he wrote at the end that perhaps I shouldn't have been so profuse in describing my wife's qualities. Almost like, I don't know if that's appropriate or not. And the Rebbe crossed out the word I shouldn't have, and underlined the should part, and saying, meaning the Rebbe didn't even respond to it. The Rebbe just recorrected the sentence, saying, I should have been so profuse in describing my wife's qualities. It's something the Rebbe wanted us to emphasize over and over again, and never be stingy on that part of, both in our relationship and about ourselves, and for sure in others, in friends, etc. Another part is to focus on the present. And you'll read this in the book, and I'll be happy, actually, you could find this book online. I always, on our website, actually, I always found reading a paper book, and for those that actually lick your finger between pages, I don't recommend it for our current time. But we have this old lady, and now she has an iPad, so she's still, if she's reading a page and she scrolls to the next page, she still would lick and put all these marks, these finger marks, on the tablet, whatever on the Fire, whatever you call those things, where she reads books. But how do I get it? Oh, so anyway, I'll be happy to share the online version. I just find it more powerful reading it in a book. But in 1991, some of you, I'm sure, remember the Crown Heights riots, which took place in Brooklyn, and a lot of hostility and a lot of things were going on then. And to bridge the gap and to bring more unity, what they wanted to show the world is a lot of tours to bring people to Crown Heights and show that things are back to normal, that we're getting along, and things are, okay. And the Rebbe they asked the Rebbe if it's a good idea to bring people in and to focus on how good things are, and things are better now. And the Rebbe says, in principle, it's a good idea. But don't highlight, if you're going to show that things are good now, it might highlight that in the past things were very bad. So try to highlight now, emphasize the positive, meaning emphasize the present, not mentioning what it once was like. Don't, like a lot of the before and after, what's very fulfilling for any gym is to show a person weighing 400 pounds and the after where they're slim and fit and with the six-pack. So you're trying to show the before and after. The Rebbe is saying is we shouldn't be lingering on the before when it comes to our past, when it comes to what we're going through with friends. Don't focus on negative pasts. If there was terrible riots and events that happened and things are fine now, the Rebbe wanted to allow visitors to see and experience the joy in the community and the sincerity and the unity, the togetherness, connectedness, the way it is in the present, but untainted by the negative context of a previous tragedy that happened. And I think that makes sense. We also know I think there's books written on this, or I could add that in an email tomorrow. The Rebbe put a lot of emphasis in people who are prisoners, people who are incarcerated. The Rebbe said they're human also, And while they're serving their time, they need to be looked at as human and help them get back into society. Like rehabilitation, the way it's supposed to really mean. And there was some beautiful things that unrelated really to the class, but once Chabad has this incredible organization that was founded in Florida, in South Florida, in Bal Harbour, called Aleph Institute, which is really to care for both a Jewish prisoner and for their family. And it continued also to care for a military and for their family. And actually with our Hebrew school, often we would send packages to family members, to children of children whose parents were incarcerated, or children whose parents are serving overseas, and bring them joy, mishloach manot. So that was a big project of Chabad. But sometimes they would, some of these prisoners, when they were released, and they would go in half houses, they would come to see positive environments and communities. They would come to 770 and they would participate in the Rebbe's public talks. And before one of the talks, the Rebbe sent out a note that usually when guests come, a tour and a guest would come from different communities, they would sit together. The Rebbe didn't want them to sit together at the Rebbe's talk because it would be very obvious that they are not from here. And people would ask where they're from, and people would say, "Oh, they were just released from imprisonment," and it would give a negative part to their face that people would right away judge them. So the Rebbe wanted them to be more dispersed. And that's just a small, not really related, it just came to mind. But over here, when one of the encounters the Rebbe had with a person who has been incarcerated, the Rebbe told him is focus on the benefits of being free rather than on dwelling on memories of your prison time. And at first it may be difficult, the Rebbe says, but you can do it. And it's a trained focus with all of our negative experiences, we focus on that. And comparing good with bad colors, you focus more on the bad, like the missing tile syndrome, that if you have a beautiful bathroom, or last night we saw a beautiful mikveh in South Korea, and if there's one tile missing, your eyes focus on that part. So we get carried away with anger or fear or trepidation and sadness. We have to make room for a positive influence and focus on that as well. Okay, another part is what we quoted actually before from the Mishnah, Pirkei Avot. One of our classes, we focused on Ayin Tov, which is the good eye, which is one of the students of Rabbi Yochanan. He asked 5 of his top students, go out to the world, say ulamad, go and study. I'm giving you a project. What is a good trait for people to have? And one says a good eye, one says a good heart, but one says, Rabbi Yossi HaChassid, I think, he says, you should have a shachen tov, which is a good neighbor. It's important to be around a good, positive surrounding, a good influence. I know that, and you know that when you're around a good influence, it's a good for you. When you're around a negative influence, it could rub off on you. We know that with our neighbors. We know that with our inner circle, and we know that with our family. It's important to be around a good influence. Actually, Freddie Hager, he was a businessman from London, and he shares on an encounter he had with the Rebbe that he was coming for guidance on his business and also for a blessing. And in a yichidus, in a private audience, the Rebbe advised him to make it a point to do business with upbeat, positive people. You should look for them at your fairs and interact with people of goodwill at work. Actually, recently, I don't know if this is for the recording or not, but someone in our community, they're so happy that they're working from home, not because they avoid traffic and not because they could stay in pajamas all day. They love being at home because they couldn't stand the work environment. It was toxic. The people around them, everyone was talking negatively about others. There was no cohesiveness, no sharing. People would stand in people's way. Like she couldn't stand being around other people. And it's understandable, because the more you're around those type of people, it's just not good for your health. And when you're around good people, you're just in a jolly mood. I could hear in people's voices when they're in a conversation, if they have visitors that are good, they're just joyful. My mother, actually, I was just speaking to her in Montreal, and she's barely been leaving her house for months, barely, like many of us. And just today she went out on a strawberry picking with a family that we're very close with, and with little kids. Of course, she would wish it was her own grandchildren that was visiting, but she went with little kids and a family friend. And I was just able to hear in my mother's voice, it was just so, she sounded so good. She sounded so healthy and strong. It was beautiful. And it's simple advice, but it's a powerful, it's healthy. We're deeply affected by our environment and the people we're around. And a shachen tov, a good neighbor, could be very influential and a good friend. So make it a point to associate yourself with positive people in your environment, about socializing. And that's really from the Mishnah, but so obviously many of you know it, but I think it's important. Another part is be involved in work that you love doing. Even when it comes to Torah study, the Talmud tells us, and the Rebbe will quote it, people would often ask the Rebbe, what should I study? Where do I begin? And the Rebbe's answer, it was almost like clockwork. The Rebbe's answer was, B'makom sheliba chafetz. You have to study what you enjoy. You have to study what you love. Some people enjoy more spiritual and Kabbalistical. Some people enjoy more rigid law. Some people enjoy more stories. Some people enjoy more Chumash and Parasha. Whatever it is that speaks to you and brings you joy, that's what you should study, because then you would carry it through. You would keep it up even on a day that you're very tired, for example. And the same is also with a profession. Not to say to quit a profession if you're involved in it, but there was a school teacher from England visited the Rebbe for Yechidus, for a private audience, and in his note that he handed the Rebbe, he outlined some of his accomplishments that he's been doing. He was basically introducing himself to the Rebbe. And as a teacher, he was saying some of the things he implemented with the students. And after reading the note, the Rebbe responded by gently saying, it's obvious from your report that you are very devoted in your mission, but I don't perceive that you find joy in your work. So it's not enough to just be good at what you do. I have many people in our community that are good at numbers and stocks, but does it bring them joy? I doubt it. And for some people it does. They love that thrill and that uncertainty. But the key to success is loving what you do. You can do something what you don't enjoy for a few years, but we all know that you can have a school teacher that could be going for 40 years and is still going strong. And we know many in our community because they love it. It keeps them, it brings them joy. But if you don't love it, you could do it for a few years until it weighs on you and it builds resentment and it causes, it's harder. So anyway, I hope that this is making sense. I hope I'm not, I'm doing a little bit too much. But the point is, if you do what you love, you will love what you do. And that's really to keep that one short. There was even a Chabad rabbi. Actually, I don't know if anyone saw at the beginning. I asked for those that were on the talk last night at the beginning. One of the first questions I asked him is how he found South Korea. Meaning, thank God I found Marin. But Marin was available 12, 13 years ago when he found South Korea. So, and I asked him, was your wife on board? And he had an interesting answer. It wasn't what I expected. Adina and I were talking about it after because, when I dated, it was something I wanted to open up a new Chabad. And I certainly wanted to, marry someone that had a similar plan. But it was very interesting, and I could send you the recording after. I was thinking about it after the way you answered, but I'll keep it a cliffhanger for those that didn't watch it. I'll send you the YouTube. But it's important so anyway, a Chabad rabbi, he decided to serve as a shliach together with his wife. This was in the 60s when it wasn't popular to go far, and it was very remote, and there wasn't Zoom yet. And they signed a letter of commitment, meaning Rebbe, we are ready. So the Rebbe met with them, but he asked the Rebbetzin directly, did you sign this letter joyfully or because you felt you have to? Do you feel compelled, or was it joyful? And only once she confirmed that it was joyful, and she did it with gladness of heart, and selflessly to serve a community, that the Rebbe gave his blessing and approval. And I'll just say, listen, at the end of the day, the parts I love doing of our community is building and meeting and learning with people and talking with people. But one of the many hats I wear, and I wear it with pride, is I have to fundraise. I have to be fiscally responsible for our community, especially at a time like this, making sure we cover our budget, etc. But I always want to make sure when people do donate, I never wanted to feel that it's compelled, that people feel guilty and therefore give. It's actually something I don't know if I could say I'm proud of, is that people give joyfully. They give willingly. They give lovingly, and not because they feel, oh my gosh, if I don't give, the rabbi's going to be on my door next week, so I may as well just give it in advance. But it's important that people don't feel compelled. So anyway, we'll give another talk of fundraising. I'm sure I could learn. I have a lot of tips I still have to learn. But over here, it's more about not only learning what you feel joyful in, but doing what you feel joyful in. And if you do it that way, you'll love it. You'll love what you do. Another part, and Maddie, I think you're really going to enjoy this one. It's called bitul, which is, I don't know, humility is the English, but it's a lot more. It's like surrendering yourself, which for most people, the idea of surrender seems it's a weakness. You're surrendering, you're putting up a white towel. Bitul means more losing it means more to lose yourself. That it's not all about I. And I know I've shared this before, but someone wrote to the Rebbe, and just to quote the words, he wrote to the Rebbe, I'm just going to find the page again. I have the soft cover, so it closes easily. Here he wrote to the Rebbe, I wake up each day sad and apprehensive. I can't concentrate. I find it hard to pray. I keep the commandments, but I find no spiritual satisfaction. I go to synagogue, but I feel alone. I begin to wonder what life is about. I would like the Rebbe's help. And the Rebbe replied to him, this is on page 372, the Rebbe didn't even write a single word. The Rebbe, all he did was underline the first sentence of each of his lines was I. I feel apprehensive. I feel alone when I come to shul. I can't concentrate. I find it hard. And the Rebbe just underlined the I of every sentence, and the person understood and entered a path of spiritual recovery. We call it a bitul. And focusing more, not on the I, but focusing more on giving. Basically, if we over-focus on ourselves, it's a cause of suffering. If we stop thinking so much about us, you, because honestly, and I'll say this as politely as possible, is your ego can never be a source of happiness. And instead of seeing yourself through your own eyes, start seeing yourself through the eyes of our Creator, through the eyes of God. God chose to be in a relationship with you. And the fact is, He put you in this world. God says, I need you. I want you. So if you look at yourself in a relationship with God, a finite being able to be in an infinite relationship with the infinite, there's real joy about stepping out of yourself and putting yourself in the infinite. And a chassid, a Chabadnik student, a bacher, he once asked the Rebbe, how can I be joyful all the time? The way it's required by Jewish law. And actually, for those that were learning the Torah portion last week, there's a beautiful verse that says, Tachat asher lo avadata et Hashem Elokecha besimcha v'tuv levav. God says that I became angry, and there was this is during the tests and during our 40-year wandering in the desert, and Moshe and our Torah portions are rebuking times that we failed some of the tests and we complained and kvetched. But God says, because you didn't serve God joyfully. Because you didn't serve God, besimcha, with joy. And so anyway, this bacher, he asked the Rebbe, how can you be joyful all the time? Which is what's mandated as a chassid. And the Rebbe, I'm just going to quote it, and I'll be happy to share the source tomorrow. Reflect upon the fact that you are a finite creature whom the Creator has given the privilege to be bound with the infinite through mitzvot. If you keep in mind that your soul is a part of God, how can you not be constantly joyful? And from then on, the Rebbe would, whenever he would see him at a Farbrengen, the Rebbe would ask him, "Nu, was tut sich mit simcha? Nu, what's happening with your joy? Are you able to live up to that joy? Meaning it perpetuate it, keep it all the time." Because a soul-based life, if your life is soul-based and always in a connection with God and realizing that's the center, rather than I in the center, a soul-based life is rooted in bliss of being rather than the anxiety of becoming. When I put I first, and it's my ego, it's what am I today, and what am I going to look like, and why am I not feeling a certain thing? But when you put the neshama first and your relationship with Hashem, you're just in the present, in the being, and that itself could cause joy. I'm sharing a lot. I think I'll try to wrap it up. But this idea of becoming, and I'll put it in bullet points more for tomorrow, about being other-centered, not being self-centered, but putting others first, and making that helping others is the most in the most helpful self-help. I don't know if that makes sense. Is the most effective form of self-help is helping others. If you want to have self-help, is by helping others. And the Rebbe would often the Rebbe has many letters where the Rebbe, people will come to the Rebbe with big problems, and the Rebbe say, put yourself in an active position of helping, of being there to help others. And you'll see an incredible thing when you're in that position. It helps you so much more. Any thoughts? I'll just read some notes. I have a little more to share, but this is good to know. The technique of replacing thoughts with positive ones works with nightmare dreams too, which I taught my children. Awesome, Gail. Okay, great to know. Wow, good to know. What would you say to someone who finds it hard to live with their negative spouse? Oh, wow. It actually makes you ill if you do something you hate doing. It's definitely an amazing, very important question, and every situation is different. You first have to look deeply into yourself and to see, is this relationship salvageable? Meaning, is there tikva, is there hope? If you do work, is he ready to work, or is she ready to work? In a relationship it takes two people. So you could be a kind person and think always positive as we're learning, but if the other person is not, and is disrespectful and worse, abusive, it could be very dangerous. And like I said before, it's a mitzvah to be divorced. Actually, I'm not I'm not trying to advertise her, but Adina is actually amazing at working with women in relationships and in need of help. You could reach out to Adina. She's actually really good at it. She helped me a lot. Anyway, but we should definitely continue that conversation. But that's maybe off the record. We'll continue, because that's a really important thing. What I did, I was successful, but I sure didn't make any money from being an ECE teacher. But you love doing it, right? And I think looking back, you would never trade that in. You do it with love. Betul, right? Maddie, I think you wanted to name the middle name of your dog Betul or something, right? I learned this from a teacher. Your ego is not your amigo. Oh, I like that. Your ego is not your amigo. By the way, another nice ego, EGO, is an acronym for edging God out. That the more self there is, the less God you allow in. In the quote, the Talmud, Howard would give me the exact source. It's in the Talmud Sota. I don't know the page, but it says, Ein ani v'hu yecholin ladur. God says that a person with ego, I think it's page 7 or 8 in Sota, talks about ego. The ego is like comparable to idol worship. It talks about ego, and it says haughtiness. God says, I can't live in the same place. He's not leaving me any room to be in the same world as him. So God says I can't have a relationship there. It's pretty heavy words. I am not convinced the market accommodates the universal jobs a person can love. Sometimes it is okay. Oh, for sure. Adrian, you're bringing up an amazing point. If feed your family. I would rather have been an artist, but my son was relying on me. I did not hate or love most. Absolutely. And I would say a bigger majority of our society do things that are not what we love doing, but you could find joy in what you're doing. You have to go to work with an attitude of why I'm doing this. That even if it's the attitude, I'm going there because I'm supporting my family, you could work joyfully and put things in place that you could allow joy in, and make that at the front, make that a priority, and meditate on parts to find joy in what you're doing and find pieces of it that bring you the joy, and you focus on that. Of course, it's very rare for a person to be quitting a job and only being picky on only finding something joyful. If a person does have that, that's an extreme blessing and a rarity. But finding joy in what you're doing, I think we could all do. And making, some people, I would recommend even making a list of things that are affirmations of why they are doing what they're doing and how to find joy in what they're doing, I think is a good one. And Adrian, actually, I could imagine you would be a good artist. I actually see that. I heard that one at Aish also. Okay, cool. So let's wrap up. And again, a lot of it is from the book, but Chassidus teaches, and as I said before, that it has to lead to action. So some recommendations, a few practices that, again, are coming from the book that I put together, and that could be helpful towards this end of making a positive change. Some of you, it may be easier to do with a mentor or a friend. Like I said before, having a good friend, a chaver tov, could do wonders. And I've heard from some of you, I remember actually till today, Tessa, you once shared, it was the most beautiful thing that you shared about Barbara and Howard. Howard's like a brother to you. It was like such incredible words. And I'm not going to say I was jealous because it's going to sound negative, but it's an incredible thing to have a real friend, to have a good friend. And I've shared about it before. Someone asked the Rebbe, what is a Rebbe? And the Rebbe said, a friend. And that seemed like, we all have friends. And the Rebbe says, what do you do with your friends? And he says, I go golfing with those friends. I go for movies with these friends. And I go out for dinner with these friends. And the Rebbe says, a friend, the way I understand it, the friend is one who you could share your darkest secrets with. And they don't look at you any differently. On the contrary, they have a deeper, profound respect for you. And they're there to help you. And I think I shared this somewhere. Unfortunately, I do funerals too often. And someone shared at the time, this was like 6-7 years ago, I was like, it wasn't that that nice. And I found later it was one of the nicest things I've ever heard. He said that this friend who passed, he was always happy when I got promoted. It was the most amazing thing. He was happy in my joy. And how often when someone else gets promoted, you clap and you'll send them a nice email, but deep down you're like, I wish that was me. But to have a real friend, actually, God willing, my son will watch this recording in years from now. Yossi, we compliment about him on this all the time. He has friends who won massive international competitions in the Chabad world. And his friend in Vacaville, brilliant boy. His name is Mendel. They're the same age. And he got a gold trophy, which is like the highest award, competing with like thousands of other Chabad children. And it's called the Chidon. They actually learned the mitzvot of the Rambam, and that's what I actually have been studying with Yossi. And I saw the look on Yossi's face when his friend won. He saw it, he was watching on the computer. He was jumping for joy, like genuine gladness. And it was the most amazing. It was like, I have goosebumps remembering that. I was like, if only we could all have that. It's actually an amazing thing. So anyway, not to delve on that too much, but to have a good friend could do wonders, could do amazing things, and find one, and it could be amazing.
Rabbi Landa, I have to interrupt to tell you how we met Barbara and Howard, which is even more amazing. And from that, how we became like better than family.
Was it at a well, a water well? Because all the good relationships in Torah, it happened at a well. Jacob met his spouse there, and Moses did. So,
I wish it was. It was a Shiva minion from my father,
wow.
and they came not knowing us, but they saw that there was a Shiva at the shul, and I had met Barbara just once in the office, and she relayed the story to me years later. She goes, Howard, we have to go. There's a minion, and we have to go support these people. And I always say, in my grief, I'll never forget it. I saw them walk in, and I'm grieving. I love my father, and I'm in grief. I look up and I go, who's that? You know, it was like, and from there, I can't even begin to tell you what we mean to one another, the four of us.
Amazing.
So I just have to share that from them doing a mitzvah.
Oh, beautiful. And mitzvah goreret mitzvah. And also, just even though you were in a time of grieving, but out of a Shiva minion, you were able to build on such an incredible relationship that's been around for so many years at such a sad time. Again, it's a beautiful. Thank you. That's so important to know. Thank you. So just to leave you with some practical guidance, I would say, and again, from the book, a lot of it is based on, is set aside a few minutes each day, either in the morning after you do your Modeh Ani or before retiring in the evening, a minimum of 5 things that you're grateful for right now. And think about each one of them and just relish in it. And say thank you. Thank you to Hashem for giving me this in my life. And next time you're feeling down or anxious, just pull out that list. A lot of us, you don't even have to go far to pull. It's on your phone. If you're tech savvy enough, just write it on your phone as a note and just go through it every now and then. I would say even every day. And another thing is reframe your negative language. Be more conscious, or commit yourself to be more aware of your language, and spend maybe 48 hours just recording anything negative you talk about yourself and rephrasing things. And actually my wife Adina is really good at this. She's been learning rephrasing things, and find a pattern of how often you're in a negative place of speech or thought, and find a way to reframe it to have a positive outlook of it, a positive implementation of that shift, that verbal shift. And this is probably the hardest, is identify people that you resent and reframe your view of them. There's some people who just don't want to be around, and some people it's important not to be around. And if it's unhealthy, and you put up a barrier, that's important. But if it's someone who you don't like the way they look, or you don't like the sound of their voice, or you don't like the way they say certain things, is you have a negative opinion about him or her, perhaps from a recent incident, or perhaps of something they're doing. Actually, interesting. I was able to do this. Now, Adina and I were talking about this. I'll probably end with this, but it's a little bit of a touchy subject. But we all have judgment right now. The world has become such a judgeful place. I don't know if that's a real word or not. Judgeful place. Is it a real word? Is that a word?
Yes.
Judgeful?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay, good. A judgeful place on what everyone else is doing. Oh, you have too many people over, or you're not wearing your mask high enough, or you're wearing your mask too often, you should take it down a little bit. Everyone has a judgment. Everyone thinks what they have is normal, and that's good. You should think what you're doing is normal. But finding, if someone is not doing what you would expect, almost finding a reason of why framing them in a positive place. Maybe they have a sunburn on their nose, or maybe they have a breathing condition and they have asthma. I don't know, whatever. And I don't know what the rules are if breathing your own air, if you have asthma. I don't know these things. But I actually tried it yesterday and today, preparing for this class, just reframing what people were doing that I could easily get mad at, because we could all judge now so easily. With the mask and the lines and whatever, and finding a way to explain what they're doing. Maybe this person, he's so alone that they just need to be around people, so they get extra close. Find a good reason of putting people in a positive mind. And it's good just to reframe for yourself. And I see from Gail, it reminds me of an English immigrant friend I had. I complained of the foggy weather in Daly City. She said, but Gail, the fog is so great for the complexion. Oh, that's beautiful, right? That's very nice. That's very nice, Gail. And we, like I told you before, like even small words to reframe of a person or of a thing, like from bitter, she was able to say so easily, I could be better. It's like such a simple word, but it could make such a big difference. Perhaps they went through, forget about the mask. That was just a petty example, just what we're going through now. But if someone is always angry and upset and you're like, oh, that guy, maybe they had an abusive childhood and maybe they've come through such great lengths. I met a guy recently, it tore my heart hearing his story. And I've actually, I see him often, not now because of COVID, but I do a 5-mile walk on Shabbos. I miss it actually. I've been gaining it. You guys don't see me, but I only do it up here. But I've been putting on some weight because I don't do my Shabbos walk anymore. And I would meet a lot of people. We would just wave, and people would expect to see the rabbi walking with his kids. So there's one guy I was always very nice. He's actually Jewish, but he would never come to shul. He's a born again Christian, but we recently met. And I give Val the story of what he went through. I'm not going to share it with you, but if only, like I was nice as it is, but if only I would have known an iota of what he had been going through and a tip of the iceberg, I would be extra kind to him. And it's so easy to judge, but little do we know what people, their own peckle of what they've gone through and the abuse that he had to endure and for years. It's not important for now. So then another part is record a setback and see how it was a springboard. So many times what looked like such a dark time ended up being such a time of exhilaration. Whether it's a person who was out of a job and it opened the door to something so much better, or a person who had a breakup and they were alone, and it ended up being that they were able to be in so much more of a healthier relationship. But at the time, they weren't able to see it. Myself, Adina, when Baruch Hashem, thank God, Adina's expecting now, but when before Chaya was born, 9th month, it was in March of 2016, I guess February 2016, we were given notice that we have to leave our home. We got along great with the landlord, and it was just they needed the house back. And Adina was expecting, and I was very nervous. And I remember my friend telling me, Menachem, you're going to buy that guy flowers. You're going to be so happy with giving you notice. It's going to be amazing. And at the time, I couldn't imagine. And now he's right. I want to hug the landlord because now, Baruch Hashem, we have a home and we planted our roots here permanently, and we're so much more secure, God, Baruch Hashem. But it's like recording something that was such a setback and seeing how it was actually a springboard, and looking at the before and the after and seeing some amazing things. Okay. Anyway, that's really just to bring together points of positivity. I would like to actually, if it's possible, Barbara, if you have anything that you could add or share, I always look forward to your wisdom and some feedback or some thoughts that you've had over the week. If you could share anything.
Oi. The shelter in place is actually a blessing that I have spent getting to know myself a little bit better.
Wow. And
getting to know my relationship with God, the God that's in me, and my God. What you teach.
Barbara, you just got muted. To say again what you teach.
What you teach, I began to learn in the 70s, where we were taught, you are perfect. Well, it's sort of true. You know, you have to forget it and remember it at the same time. And what you're talking about is so deep that it's if I can devote 80% of my time to doing that, that would be good. Wow.
And to follow up on that, in one place in the Talmud, it says, "B'shvili nivra ha'olam," that the whole world was created for me. In another place in the Talmud, it says, "I'm but dust." We say it in our daily Amidah, the last paragraph. We say, "V'nafshi ka'afar lakol tiyah." Let my soul be like earth and dust, meaning let me be totally humbled and surrendered. So which one is it? Is the whole world created for me? Or am I supposed to be like no one? Meaning, am I perfect, like you were saying from the 70s? And the truth is, the way we understand it is, you have two pockets, and you have to have both cards, one in each pocket, and you have to know when you should be pulling out which card. When you're thinking of yourself a little bit too much, you have to know you're but dust. And when you think of like nothing and you're putting yourself down, you have to pull out the other one and say the whole world was created for me. So thank you, Barbara, for sharing that idea of you're perfect and a lot of things to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, so today is the 20th of Av. It's an important day on our calendar. It's the yahrzeit of the Rebbe's father, Reb Levi Yitzchak. You could imagine the giant the Rebbe was. His father was his main teacher, and often he would quote not only the teaching of his father, but saying that I owe most of my teachings to my father. So it's definitely a good time to have this discussion, reframing and using the Rebbe's guidance. If anyone else, I see Ava, you would like to share something?
I just was wondering what classes you have coming up for us next, because I'll miss these Monday evenings.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind of you. We have actually a lot of fun stuff planned. I don't have a date yet. I'm just confirming, but I'm considered a hockey rabbi, and there's different types of rabbis. There's a Rabbi Pickle. There's a rabbi that's a profession, like he'll teach you Hasidus and Torah through pickle making. And it's apparently been very successful. He's actually a rabbi in Southern California. He's actually a Hasidic star in the singing world also. His name is Rabbi Marcus. He's the leader of a band called Eighth Day. So he'll be, I don't have a date yet, but it'll be happening in the next 10 days. I'm also starting a new class on Mashiach. Really looking at Mashiach, which is one of the 13 principles of and the tenets of our faith, principle of our belief, not as a uncomfortable time in the distant future, but seeing how it's a really present and it's really happening and it's really now and it's really up to me and you. So JLI, which is the Jewish Learning Institute, they crafted a class about Mashiach. And so God willing, I'll put out more information about that. One of the big things we're also talking about, actually one other just important lecture that's going to be happening on August 30th. 9/11 is coming up in a month, and obviously now we're all going through trouble, so it's hard to remember it's already 20 years, well, almost 20 years since 9/11. But there was an observant Jew who was on the 75th floor, who was on his way up, and he saw people coming down, and someone needed help. He has an amazing story of that day, of being there in the towers, and how his life was saved by helping someone else. A really, really powerful talk. Empowering talk. So he's going to speak again through Zoom. That will be on August 30th. One of the, it should be a really enlightening evening. I'm looking forward to it. And I have some other things, I'll put it out through email. But one of the big things we're talking about now is high holidays. We have a high holiday steering committee. Leslie, who's on the call this evening, is part of our steering committee. If anyone else, we're looking for ideas. We are going to have an in-person socially distant, mask-wearing outdoor service, and we're trying to find the right ideas of making it, first of all, safe, and making sure it's abiding by not only the laws, but making it absolutely safe to be comfortable for everyone, but at the same time, for those that are not comfortable, to make Rosh Hashanah for them. So we're looking at different ideas. First of all, to do Rosh Hashanah either in a big outdoor either someone's a big outdoor backyard, and we'll do it through shifts, so it won't be more than 30 people at a time, and do different services throughout the day at a person's convenience, or perhaps do it in a bigger place like a park and do a bigger service. Obviously, number one is to make it safe. Number two is to make sure we're keeping halacha, which is Jewish law. So there is a lot to put together. Leslie and I were having a discussion with several others. Anyone is welcome to join. We'll have a town hall meeting later this week or maybe early next week to come up with ideas. Another part is also to empower people to not be rabbis, but to do Rosh Hashanah, to learn how to blow the shofar and create zones perhaps of people set up in different places across the county where people could hear the shofar in person from a safe distance. So we're coming up with different ideas, but high holidays is certainly on our mind, and coming up with a safe and making sure that we could still cover our budget, even though a lot of people won't be coming for high holidays, and making sure that we could be fiscally responsible and our high holiday appeal. So a lot to talk about there. I know you didn't ask about that, Ava, but it's on my mind. Space for elders have no intention of leaving their homes for the holidays. Yeah, so Gail, that's our job. Chabad is, we need actually Rabbi Litzman shared that last night, that we're here. He was sharing that there's a lot of Israeli, a lot of times they speak in Hebrew, but if there's an English speaker, they'll speak in English, and everyone will switch, because we're here to make it comfortable for everyone. So we're not only finding the right balance and doing one, we're going to try to see whatever we could do and make it safe and right for everyone. So anyone is welcome to join. If you have ideas of a good outdoor space, specifically in Novato, that we could meet, and within a few mile radius of my home, we're all ears. And on that topic, if anyone knows of a tent that we could, either someone would like to donate, or if someone has that we could borrow, that would be ideal. Because I've been checking rentals for a pretty decent sized tent. It gets pretty expensive, especially we'll need it for a few days. So if anyone knows of where we can borrow a tent, that would be pretty good.
Some of the people who are doing various kinds of things, Rabbi, have been doing a series of smaller tents. And I know that people will have the smaller tents for you to use in their home.